Poor teacher lives in car to save money for sick wife. His student sees him and... In a neighborhood near his home, young Steven Nava stumbled upon something unexpected. An abandoned car that served as a makeshift home for someone he knew and loved. Someone he had not seen for decades but whom fate wanted to put back in his path that night. As he approached to see who it was, the young man discovered a terrible truth that broke his heart. The story we're going to tell you today is really touching and at the same time unfortunately very sad. But in order to understand it, we must first go back to the exact moment when the life of our protagonist, a retired professor whose teaching career was a real success, changed forever and turned into a nightmare. Jose Villarreal was a charming school teacher throughout his life, and although things were not always easy, he was truly happy dedicating his life to the education of children. There was nothing that made him happier than seeing the excited faces of his students when they learned something new or when they received the grades of an exam for which they studied hard. Although the salary of a Mexican teacher was far from what we considered the ideal salary and did not allow for a life of great luxury, Jose was never bothered by it and was satisfied with what he had. For him, the most important thing was to ensure that his students enjoyed their classes and acquired new knowledge that would enable them to build a good working future. Material things were not so important to him because he believed that the true wealth of people lies in their education and their ideas, not in their possessions. Therefore, Jose always led a simple life with his wife and children and never felt he lacked for anything. His career as a teacher was long and fruitful. Today, hundreds of students still remember him fondly and thank him for all he did for them. But in life, nothing lasts forever, and the time came for retirement. At almost 75 years old, Jose was one of the longest-serving teachers of his generation. And although it pained him deeply to have to step away from the classroom and say goodbye to his beloved students, he felt it was time to stop and spend more time caring for his family. The paperwork was done, retirement was arranged, and a modest pension check was secured with which to live a quiet life. However, the respite his financial breathing space provided was short-lived as Villarreal soon found himself surrounded by debt that swallowed up his savings. His wife, Clara Montesinos, whom he met while they were both in high school and to whom he'd been married for more than 50 years, became seriously ill with liver cancer. I'm sorry to have to give you this news, Mr. and Mrs. Villarreal, but tests have revealed that your wife is suffering from advanced liver cancer and requires urgent treatment. We don't know if we'll be able to save her life, but if we don't try and act quickly, we'll have no choice, the doctor explained to him and his wife. Jose never felt sadder and more desolate than he did that day in that doctor's office. He just retired and had hundreds of plans to spend more time together. His wife always respected Jose's passion for his work and was never angry about the many times they had to postpone plans because of it. But just when they would have all the time in the world to be together without interruption, fate once again came between them and made them face the most difficult test of their lives. I don't want to do the treatment, Jose. I'm too old and we have no money. I won't stand to see you ruin yourself trying to save me, and even less knowing that the chances of the treatment working are very slim. Please don't sacrifice yourself for me, his wife told him when he got home. She was very upset, and as she spoke, Jose noticed her hands were shaking. Jose couldn't imagine a life without his wife. He would never let his wife die because of him, much less if the reason was money. He was determined to take care of her to the end. He didn't care what price he'd have to pay. Don't ever say that again, ever. Please, Clara, you break my heart thinking like that. You think I'm gonna give up and let you die without trying to do everything I can? You think I care more about continuing to have money than saving my wife's life? I don't want that at all. Life would be meaningless if you die, so why would I need the money? He replied in despair at the thought of losing her. Jose was a very calm and kind person, but the situation left him totally overwhelmed. He was in so much pain that hearing his wife say that made him explode. All right, take it easy. Forget what I said to you, honey. I don't know what I was thinking. In fact, I haven't really known how to feel for hours. I'm terrified, Jose. They just told me I could die in just a few months. It's too much to take in, she replied as she sat down next to him and hugged him from behind. I'll never leave your side, Clara. I'll take care of you until the end, even if it's the last thing I do, I promise, Jose told her, much calmer, and they stayed in each other's arms for hours. That night was probably the saddest and longest of their lives. The week after the diagnosis, the couple accepted the conditions that their doctor gave them and started the treatment to try to reduce the tumor that Clara had in her liver. The first months of the chemotherapy treatment were very hard, but Jose's wife managed to overcome it. However, when they returned to the doctor's office to find out the results of the treatment, they were not expecting good news. I'm sorry to tell you the chemo has not worked and the tumor's barely decreased in size. I'm sorry, we'll have to give her several sessions of chemotherapy again and at the same time, combine them with several sessions of radiotherapy to try to shrink the tumor by all means. It'll be a much more aggressive treatment and will leave her very weak, but there's no other way to do it. If we want to have any option, we must take all the measures we have within our reach, their doctor told him with great sadness and trying to show as much optimism as he could. Although Jose did not see the good side of things on any side, in fact he was feeling more sad and angry. We'll do whatever it takes, doctor. Of course we will, don't worry. Let's continue. answered Jose, trying to keep his composure and not burst into tears in front of his wife. She needed him to stay strong and he could not falter. What Jose never told his wife was that he could no longer afford to pay the medical bills for her chemotherapy sessions. He knew she would refuse to go on if she knew they were running out of money, so he decided to hide it and reassure her with little lies. Jose could only think of his wife's well-being, so when the time came to face a new wave of medical bills, he didn't hesitate for a moment to do whatever it took to pay them, sell his house and start living in the car. The elderly professor's decision was a risky one, but it was the only way he found to be able to go ahead with his wife's treatment. Clara had been in the hospital for several weeks, as the last sessions of chemotherapy and radiotherapy had weakened her greatly and she needed constant medical supervision. Jose did not tell her anything about what he'd done, and every day he visited her in her hospital room to see how she was progressing and try to encourage her. Afterward, when she was completely asleep, Jose would return to his new home and try to make himself as comfortable as possible between the back seats of the car, with blankets and pillows he'd taken before leaving home for good. Weeks went by, and although Jose never complained or told anyone what he was going through, he found it increasingly difficult to stay positive and cheerful. His whole body ached. He was very cold at night despite the blankets. He hardly ate or drank anything, and if he did, it was junk food that barely fed him. And if all that wasn't enough, when he returned to the hospital, the doctors treating his wife never brought him good news. The bad news is the treatment is going slower than we expected, but the good news is the tumor is in remission and soon we'll be able to remove it by surgery. However, right now your wife will need to rest from the last chemotherapy sessions in the hospital. Her body would not resist a new treatment right now. The doctors told him 8 months after starting the first treatment. For the first time, the doctors gave them hope and he had a reason to smile. The joy at his wife's recovery was short-lived though, because as soon as he returned to the car with the medical bills in his hand and saw the amounts he had to pay, his stomach knotted and he couldn't sleep all night. Everything he earned from his pension went to her treatments, a pension that was far too modest for the cost of cancer treatment in Mexico City. That is why he lived day and night in his car, trying to save as much as possible so his wife would never lack anything and her cancer treatments could be insured. But the truth is that although the elder Villarreal assumed his responsibility as a husband stoically, his body began to be very tired, and during the day he felt too weak to do any kind of activity. Although he felt young and had always taken good care of himself, Jose was almost 77 years old, and living in a car with hardly any food and sleeping only a few hours a night was not ideal for a person of his age, and he needed to put an end to this situation as soon as possible. He had no idea how to do that though. Luckily, fate had one last surprise in store for him that would completely change his luck and help him face the final stage of his wife's illness. An unexpected encounter during a cold winter night would change the life of the affectionate professor forever, being precisely one of his former students, the one in charge of bringing joy back into his life. Jose's former student was Steven Nava, a young financier who had the good fortune to know the professor during his childhood and of whom he had fond memories. One particularly cold winter night, Nava was walking home after having parked his car a few meters further back. While walking, Nava's curiosity piqued when he spotted a small worn-out vehicle in which he could see how someone had fallen asleep in the front seat, covered with a couple of old dirty blankets. "My God, there's someone sleeping in there. How can that be? It looks like a pretty old person. What a shame," Steven said to himself as he slowly approached. Without knowing quite why he was doing so, Nava decided to approach Villarreal's vehicle to check that the person inside was okay, unaware of the profound impact this encounter would have on his life and that of his former teacher. To Nava's astonishment, the occupant of the car turned out to be none other than his former schoolteacher, Mr. Villarreal, affectionately called Mr. V. The shock of seeing his respected mentor living in such poverty weighed heavily on Nava's heart. The conditions in which Villarreal was forced to live were devastating, a reality that struck a chord with a compassionate young man. He was overcome with emotion and decided to knock hard on the glass to wake Jose up and ask him what had happened to him and if there was anything he could do to help. "Mr. Jose, is that you? Can you hear me? What are you doing here asleep, Mr. Villarreal? Can you hear me? Hello?" He shouted from the other side of the glass until the old man woke up startled. Mr. Jose at first felt very embarrassed to have been discovered living in his car, but after several minutes talking to the kind Steven, of whom he had fond memories from his student years, the old man was grateful to have someone to talk about his problems and lighten the load he'd been carrying for months all alone. As the two exchanged words, the true extent of Villarreal's hardships came to light. With tears in his eyes, the elderly professor revealed that he lived in his car out of devotion to his ailing wife. Jose Villarreal's situation was all about raising funds to pay the mounting medical bills for his beloved wife's cancer treatments. Every penny he saved he meticulously earmarked to cover his wife's medical expenses, so he had no choice but to sacrifice his comfort and take refuge in the cramped confines of his car. Nava could not help but reflect on Mr. Villarreal's invaluable role in his own life during their time together at the school, and recalled the countless hours of support and guidance he gave him to become the successful man he is today. "Mr. V, you don't have to feel ashamed. On the contrary, what you're doing is worthy of a hero. At your age, daring to risk everything to save your wife is truly commendable. You don't know how much I admire you, but you're no longer alone. From now on, I will help you, and together we'll find a way to solve this whole situation. You have my word," promised the young man while he provided him with a hot coffee that he'd gone to get at a nearby coffee shop and a freshly made tortilla sandwich. Although at first Villarreal did not want to receive any help and felt ashamed of the way he was living, he decided to listen to Steven and let him help him. The old man was exhausted and needed the help of others, whether he liked to admit it or not. Steven kept his word to help Jose, and in just a couple of days, Villarreal's plight quickly spread throughout the community via social media, even reaching the ears of his esteemed mayor, Aquinata Warren. Mayor Warren gathered a group of compassionate people for a celebration at the Fontana Senior Community Center. Among those in attendance was Melissa Lopez, another Villarreal student who fondly recalled Mr. V's infectious energy and unwavering kindness in the classroom. Everyone recognized him because when he came into class, he always had such good energy and was so sweet, Lopez reflected in an interview for the local newspaper that was covering the event. The story of the teacher, better known among his students as Mr. V, echoed the sentiments of many others whose lives had been affected by Villarreal's selfless dedication to education and who wanted to lend him a hand at such a delicate time in his life. The heartbreaking situation stuck with Nava, who told the media, "Every day I would leave for work around 5 a.m. and see him rummaging through his trunk, and I felt the need to do something about it." Driven by an unwavering determination and a desire to have a profound impact, Nava embarked on a mission to change the life trajectory of his beloved teacher. The young man spearheaded a crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe with the initial goal of $15,000. The young man's heartfelt initiative struck a chord with countless people eager to help a lending hand, managing to exceed all expectations, amassing a far greater amount of money than expected. With the funds secured and Villarreal's 77th birthday fast approaching, Nava planned a big birthday party to announce all the money they had raised to help him and his wife. The festivities took place at the Fontana Senior Community Center, where Villarreal was greeted with a joyous chorus of laughter and fond memories by more than 100 people, including many former students whom he remembered fondly and was very happy to see again. As soon as the party began, Nava stepped forward on stage holding a check that would forever change Villarreal's life and that of his wife. The proceeds had been $27,000. This represented the community's gratitude and admiration for the retired professor. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, Villarreal's eyes filled with tears of disbelief and gratitude. "My initial thought was, am I dreaming? I still can't get over this experience," the elderly man confessed as the press approached him to immortalize the happy moment. During this happy occasion, Villarreal made a solemn promise to himself and to those present. Buoyed by the new hope and support he'd been given, he vowed to return the love and kindness he'd received. "The biggest feeling I have right now is like an obligation to do a lot for the world. And the biggest feeling is that I can do it, and I'm going to find a way to do it," he declared. Acknowledging the immense impact of teachers in shaping the future, Nava also shared a profound reflection. In an emotional voice, the young man noted, "We don't appreciate these teachers enough, and that's something we should do. Today we are giving back a part of their love and dedication to a man who devoted his entire life to teaching and who gave us his best years in exchange for nothing. Thank you, Mr. V, you are a true hero." After that day and after thanking everyone for what they had done for him and his wife, Mr. Villarreal never had to live inside his car again. He was able to pay all of his overdue medical bills and was then able to pay for the rest of the treatments his wife needed to fully recover from the cancer. A year and a half after the diagnosis, Clara was completely cancer-free and was able to leave the hospital accompanied by her beloved husband. With the money from the donations, Mr. Jose bought a new house where he would spend the last years of his life with his wife and enjoy doing what he loved most, being a teacher, though not full-time, of course. A couple of days a week, he would organize mentorships with young people who needed it to help them improve in their studies and serve as a guide for their future career. That was his way of thanking everyone for helping him, educating the new generations with the same love and dedication he did for them. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.